It does sound loud to me. Of course, it is. It's a bit unusual for us to be having a normal class this morning with the start of our gospel meeting, and I do have to admit, I picked this date strategically, thinking that I would get kicked out, but it didn't work out that way. No, I'm kidding. If any of you think I had that much foresight, if I was planning that far ahead, you obviously don't know me very well. So, but no, we're continuing, of course, with our group teach quarter, and we are approaching the end. Is next week the end of it? So next week is the end. Held mine off till the very end, but we're continuing our encountering Jesus studies, and today we'll be encountering Jesus, if you will, by studying Thomas. And I do have to echo Jordan's thoughts somewhat. And funny enough, Jordan actually picked the lesson that I initially wanted. That was the one that jumped off the page to me. But then after hearing him talk about it and him realizing it was a much more difficult lesson than he initially anticipated, I kind of backed off that a little bit. But I will say, this one, I thought the same thing with this one. This one was a bit more difficult in preparing for than I thought. There are a lot of different, just because of the reality that we don't know that much about Thomas, because we know so little, you can approach a lesson like this in a lot of different directions, and so it was a little difficult for me, maybe more than normally is, to decide which direction I wanted to go in doing this. Maybe more so than I normally do, at least for the first half of our time this morning. I will, I guess, go fairly by the book. So if you have the lesson book with you, I will be going by that. At the start, maybe the second half, go a little off, go in a little different direction, open it up a little bit. Towards the end, especially, I want to have this more be an open discussion, if you will, and I think the text, the scripture we have about Thomas lends itself to that, just because, one, we don't know a lot about Thomas. Two, we don't know why he did what he did. We don't know, what was going through his head when he doubted that Christ had been risen. So there is going to be towards the end, there's going to be some speculation on our part. I don't think that's unwarranted, but we're kind of left to speculate on why that might have been, what the mental processes were that caused him to doubt in that. So with that, we'll go ahead and start to get into the few scriptures we have on Thomas. But I'll start off by, and I should have been clicking through this. I even have markers in my notes, but I'm not the best at keeping up with my PowerPoints. We'll start this morning, before we really dive into the scriptures, talk about what we know about Thomas, and this is for y'all. I mean, you don't have to point to a specific scripture at this point, but just at a very broad, general level, what do we know about Thomas?
An apostle?
He was an apostle. That's the very first thing I had in my notes. He was an apostle. He was mentioned. And truth be told, about, I think, maybe half of the scriptures we have on Thomas are just listing him in a list of apostles. I think it's about half. So we've got he was an apostle. What else?
I had down he was willing to die for Jesus.
He was. Yes, we'll talk about that. He was. We do see that. What was he called? Thomas yeah.
Both Thomas and Didymus, the name that we also see for him, mean the twin.
Yes, yes. So I guess the Greek for Thomas, if I understand that correctly, is Didymus, which means the twin. And who was Thomas's twin? Any idea? You're going to guess Nathaniel? It's a trick question. We don't know who the twin is, some about the best we have is some of the apocryphal writings, which are interesting in addressing who Thomas's twin might have been. Are any of you well versed in the Gospel of Thomas or anything like that? Of course, these are extra biblical. These are not inspired. But any idea what it says about Thomas being the twin and who he was a twin of? It suggests that this was a symbolic twinship with Jesus in the spiritual sense, which that's all I can say. That's extra biblical. That's not an inspired writing. No idea. But the truth is, we don't know from Scripture who the twin was. That was an interesting thought that was presented in this, quote, Gospel of Thomas. But we don't know. And so we're left to speculate on that, and so I'm not going to suggest in any way that is actually the case, that was a twinship, a symbolic spiritual twinship with Jesus, but that has been suggested in some extra biblical writings. So with that, yeah, buddy.
I had another thing about what else we know. He doesn't really show up until the crucifixion, and he's not, as far as I know, he's not in the letters either. Just like Mary. Just in that.
It's, yes. Yes. Almost everything we know is right at the end of Jesus' life. And that's why we're left to, you hate to speculate, but we just don't know that much about Thomas, so we do have to, speculate a little bit on some things when it comes to studying Thomas. So with that, we will get into some of the actual scriptures we have about Thomas, and we'll start with John 11, which Darlene, that's very small. I apologize. I didn't realize when I was doing that on my computer how small that would show up. Does somebody want to volunteer to read that, Leah?
Now Jesus loved his sister Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and are you going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him." After saying these things, he said to them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover." Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought he meant taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus has died, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him."
Okay, so I should have prefaced that by saying when we read these next few scriptures, try to read them in the light of what does this scripture tell us about Thomas? What can we learn about Thomas from these scriptures? And Thomas is, we know Thomas as doubting Thomas, and that's well deserved. That's the single, most substantial scripture we have on Thomas as him being a doubter, as him doubting that Christ had risen. And we will talk about that. Most of our class this morning will be focused in on that. But what about Thomas do we see here? If you're putting together a profile of Thomas, what do you learn about Thomas from this? Yeah, Art?
Thomas the courageous.
Thomas the courageous, Thomas the brave, Thomas the loyal. We do see a completely inapposite view of Thomas in these scriptures here. We see a brave, brave Thomas, courageous Thomas, loyal Thomas in this, which flies against the other primary passage, primary story we have, recording we have of Thomas in that. So we see a different side of Thomas here. Anything else you notice before we move on? Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting that here he says, let's go die with him. But once Jesus dies is when he seems to check out.
Yes, yes.
It's like he loses heart.
Yes, yeah. And we're going to talk about that and why that might have been. And obviously he wasn't the only one, but we will get to that here a little bit later in the lesson. All right, moving on to, and y'all will notice most of our scriptures this morning are from John. As far as these stories, it seems John mentions Thomas more than the others. But moving on to John chapter 14. Verses, can I get a volunteer for that? Yeah, go ahead.
Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. And you know the way to where I'm going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him.
All right, thank you. So this one may be a little bit more attenuated as far as what we can glean about Thomas here. But any thoughts on what's maybe revealed about Thomas here that we can learn from? Yeah, Danny.
I think that he's seeking.
He's seeking, yeah.
This passage, reminds me of like Matthew 13, Mark 4 kind of stuff where you're talking about the parable of the sower and all these people leave. And it says when he was alone, right, with the disciples, that they were asking, what did you mean by that?
Yeah.
I think this is kind of one of those moments where Thomas is seeking more from Jesus and wanting to learn from him.
Yeah, and I think that's the primary thing we're going to glean from this particular passage. So, did they understand what Jesus was saying to them? And that's not the primary point of our discussion here. We're just focusing on the Thomas aspect of it. But no, they didn't understand what Jesus was saying to them. So as Danny said, we see a inquisitive side of Thomas. If you want to look at it that way, he's curious, he's seeking, he wants to know more. So we do see this inquisitive side of him here. Dad, you look like you're about to say something.
Well, I was waiting until you were done.
Okay.
I see a connection to the past passage we read before. Let's go with him that we may die with him. You see this connection that Thomas, where are you going? Tell us, because I want to be there. I don't know the way. I can't follow you, without knowing the way. So it seems, I see another aspect of that connection. Where you're going, that's where we're going to go, even if we die with you. I want to know where you're going so I can be there.
Yeah, I hadn't made that connection. Y'all always end up making far deeper connections than I do when I'm preparing any kind of lesson. Darryl?
I was going to say, Thomas is exemplary of the kind of disciple I think Jesus is looking for. say, for instance, when Jesus gave the parable of the sower, a lot of people did go, yeah, so what, and walked away. And Jesus just walked away. And then the disciples followed him and said, Lord, what were you talking about? And Jesus told them, he said, to you it has been real to know the secrets. And the same thing, like when Jesus says something, he asks, that's what Jesus is looking for, ask what it is, and then he rewards that. Thomas had that kind of spirit.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, maybe this is pushing the boundaries a little far, but I think, what Danny said, seeking, being inquisitive, I think it suggests a very genuine, I think it suggests that Thomas was a very genuine person. Usually you don't see that seeking, that inquisitive nature in somebody that's not inquisitive. So I think that's kind of what we can glean from this. We've got him being, at least at times in his life, we've got him being brave, courageous. We've now got him being inquisitive, seeking out. Yeah, Jeff.
I was going to say, as part of my training in leadership development, I kind of understood. They do teach you to look at people's personality profiles to understand how they think and then how to manage them. And here, Thomas impresses me as someone that would be on the analytical/logical scale of personality wheel, that he wants to know how things work. And that he's not going to believe it until he sees it and it's proved to him. That's the personality he reflects to me in just a little bit that we see about him.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. That was the next thing I was going to mention, the next and the last thing I was going to mention in relation to this passage. It seems to suggest a logical side to Thomas. He doesn't understand. Well, where are you going? We don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? So it does suggest maybe an analytical, logical side. Yeah.
He's definitely not going to be operating by feelings.
Yes, I think so. Which might explain the doubt later on. But yeah, Micah.
From the relationship that Jesus had with his apostles, his disciples, Jesus was known for kind of slipping out and going places without telling his disciples. They would have to come find him, I would guess, in those cases. So this may be just kind of speaking to their relationship a little bit.
It could be.
Could be. Jesus says, I'm going somewhere, and the disciples are wondering, well, where are you going? We need to know so that we can find you later.
Yeah. It could be a very practical side of that. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, buddy.
Something I hadn't thought about until now is all the apostles had a role. Peter's role is obvious. He was the rock and the foundation. Judas's role was betrayal. Thomas's role was doubting. Showed. So Jesus could show what he showed.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think it's, I don't think he didn't have a choice, Judas and it, but yeah, I think that could be true. I'm going to have to pick it up a little bit. We're already going on almost halfway through the class, but moving on to it, I don't want to spend a lot of time here. I admit, I have my thoughts on this next passage, maybe what the author was trying to get out of this passage, but I was kind of grasping at straws. We'll go on now to John 21, verses 1 through 3, which this is after Christ has been raised, he's appeared. So I'm really curious your thoughts on this. Can I get a reader for this? Jordan.
After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples. Let's see if here it is. He revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael, Cana of Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. They said to him, who will go with you? They went out, got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing.
All right. Any thoughts on what we can learn about Thomas here? I mean, anything that would be applicable to Thomas is applicable to the others that were there, because it doesn't specifically mention him as far as what actually was said, what happened. But any thoughts on that? Yeah, buddy.
When someone in your life that you care about and love passes
that thought did cross my mind. The difficult twist for me here is that Jesus has already revealed himself to them. So this isn't, they shouldn't be in the mourning phase. Yeah, Dad, you've obviously got something else.
Stop talking, but it's interesting. Simon Peter was the most vocal, and it appears Thomas was kind of the second most vocal, because we don't have much said by the other apostles. And it's interesting too, though, that Peter was the one that denied the Lord. Thomas questioned the Lord. And those two are appeared to first. Maybe in relationship to that, assurance, you guys really stepped out here, and maybe there's something to that.
Could be. Just on a very practical level, what I got from this is maybe you can find a loyal friend in this, not only to Christ, but also, the other apostles. Yeah, Danny.
One thing, when you mentioned about half of the occurrences, right, where Thomas are in the list. But I think the one thing that kind of stands out to me about some of this stuff is it's not a long list, right?
Right.
Jesus appeared in front of crowds and all those kind of things. It's not a list of 5,000 names. He's on the short list, right? So he's close to Jesus than much more than so many other people.
Right.
So many of the stories you read about in the Gospels and all those kind of things that he would have seen and witnessed. So he's close, right? As much as almost anybody else on earth could have been.
Right. Yeah. Micah.
This is not so much an observation about Thomas as it is just the Gospel of John, but in the Synoptic Gospels, really it's Peter, James, and John, and we don't really get much about much of the other disciples. John kind of expands, and he talks a little bit about Philip. He talks about Nathaniel, and then he also talks about Thomas and Andrew. So it's interesting to see Thomas there, but also Nathaniel. You got the sons of Zebedee, they're always right in the mix of things. But it mentions two other disciples. My guess is probably Philip and Andrew, although I don't know why John would mention them, because he's mentioned them in other places.
Yeah.
But just from a narrative perspective, John seems to kind of bring those in the narrative where the other synoptics don't.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah, Tara.
One thing that sticks out to me is that when we get on, previously, when he fell at Jesus' side, he called Jesus my Lord and my God.
Mm-hmm.
Here, in this scene here, is where Jesus revealed himself, and it said that Peter said, realized that this is the Lord, this is God. And apparently Thomas didn't, and I don't know how significant that is to this passage. Thomas didn't realize it till after Jesus.
Yeah. Something I hadn't thought about. I'm not even going to comment on that because I don't. You're bringing up something I hadn't even considered. Okay, well, moving on. These are more broad, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time here. We'll just kind of go through these scriptures pretty quickly. But now let's shift our time, our discussion a little bit to the apostles as a whole, as it relates pretty immediately to the crucifixion. So moving on from that, let's go to Mark chapter 14, verses 37 through 42. I think I have that. No, I don't have that up there. I apologize. I thought I had a. No, I don't. I thought I had that up there. Well, does somebody want to? Can I get somebody to turn to that and read that for me? Yeah, Art. Oh. Either one of y'all, whatever one wants to go.
Go ahead. Mark 14, 37 to 42.
Yes.
And he came and found them sleeping, and said to Peter, Simon, are you sleeping? Could you not sleep? Could you not keep watch for 1 hour? Keep watching and praying that you may not come into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Again he went away and prayed, saying the same words. And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. And he came the third time and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? It is enough. The hour has come. Behold, the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us
Okay, so we see a weak moment here from the apostles as a whole. They can't stay awake with Jesus while he's praying as he's entering his final hours before being crucified. So we see, despite Christ's admonition to them otherwise, they can't stay asleep. This would appear to have included Thomas as well. So we see that the apostles slept. Moving on to Mark, just a few verses later, Mark 14 and verse 50. Art, can you read that one?
Verse 50.
Yes, verse 50.
And they all left him and fled.
Okay. So yeah. So they all leave him, and this would have included Thomas. Don't really want to get us too far off here, but do you think that included Peter as well? That was my question, and I don't. Maybe he initially fled, but thought better of it. I don't know, but we see another extremely weak moment here for the apostles as a whole. They all fled. So this courageous, this brave Thomas that we had just a little bit of time prior to this, we see that courage fail him here. So the next, I don't want anybody to read this because it's mainly dealing with Peter, but we do have, going back to whether Peter fled or not. Maybe he initially did, but whatever the case may be, whether he thought better of it or if he wasn't included with those that initially fled, we see that Peter follows and he denies Christ 3 times. So, and then finally, the last passage I have up here comes from Luke 23, verse 49. Can I get a reader for that very quickly? Whoever has that, you can just go ahead.
And all his acquaintances and the women who had followed him from Galilee stood at a distance watching these things.
So we see this withdrawn reality for them at this point. They stayed away. They were watching from a distance, and so all these passages together, suggest that all of the apostles really had some weak moments when it mattered most. So what's our profile for Thomas at this point? Just kind of putting together everything we've talked about so far. Any thoughts? No, that's for anything that we haven't already discussed, but.
I think he's human, right?
Yeah.
Good moments and bad moments. He's got strengths and weaknesses. He's got conviction and doubts.
Yeah.
He's human.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect summation of that. He's human. He's inquisitive. He's loyal. He's brave at times, but at other times he's weak, and as we all are. So that. We do see this human side of Thomas, as we do most of the apostles. We do see this human side of him at that point. So now, with that in mind, we've got 15 minutes left. Let's talk about the primary passage that we've got this morning on Thomas, which is, of course, where he gets his name, Doubting Thomas. So this is 2 slides. Can I get a reader for that? And considering I had so much space, I should have made that a bit bigger, but can I get a reader? Yeah, Jeff.
Evening of that day, the first day of the week, the doors being locked where the disciples were for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you." When he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them.
Okay, so this is for better or worse, rightly or wrongly, this is the passage that we know Thomas for. And it's where he gets his nickname, if you will, Doubting Thomas. So let's start our discussion. And this is where, here in the last little bit of our class, this is where I'm going to kind of open it up a lot. And this is where there's got to be a bit of speculation on our part, trying to put ourselves into the mind of Thomas at this point. But why might Thomas's reaction, why might it have been reasonable at this point? We'll talk about why it might not be reasonable here in a minute, but why might it have been reasonable? Yeah, go ahead.
One of the big things I think for me is, once again, we know Thomas is human. And after Jesus' death and resurrection, the religious leaders of the day were trying to squash, he's not resurrected, they moved the body, all these lies are starting to come out. The other thing is, too, that Thomas probably is, on the human side, is like, can I trust any of the rest of you? Because Judas, one of the 12, who had spent so much time with them, had betrayed Jesus, and it seemed like they were all very shocked and did not expect that. So it could be can I even trust any of the rest of you because of what happened to Judas?
Yeah.
So those are the two things that I think of.
Good point. I hadn't even thought of it in relation to Judas and maybe some distrust that was going around at this point in time amongst the apostles. Yeah, good point. Why? Any other reasons why you think it might have been reasonable?
Well, I can imagine what I said before. You've been around many engineers. This is the proof back to the prove it.
Yeah.
I got to have it proven to me.
Yes. Going along with that, was someone being raised from the dead, was this a common occurrence? Even when Jesus was there, was it common? No. Thomas would have known the Old Testament. Was raising somebody from the dead in the Old Testament, was it common? No, we have some. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Usually, also, when someone was raised from the dead, there was a person kind of involved in that, initiating that. So for somebody to come back on their own power, quote unquote, didn't happen. So maybe in Thomas's mind, there's nobody here who could raise Jesus. So of course he can't be raised.
Yeah. And so even in the Old Testament, these instances were, which Thomas would have known, but these were extremely few and far between. And most of the instances we have in the Old Testament were involved, in the lives of Elijah and Elisha and some miracles they performed. So this was not common in the Old Testament. And the one person, if I have done my research correctly, up to this point, the apostles had not raised anybody from the dead. We don't have any instance of that until after Christ had been risen. So Thomas is sitting there thinking the one person that we know could raise somebody from the dead is gone. Yeah, John.
What you just said, the other disciples had an advantage over Thomas because they had already seen it.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
That would make it a little reasonable.
Yeah. Leah.
This was the other apostles, maybe not to the extent that I would ever believe, but when they saw Jesus' tomb empty, it says that they still didn't understand
Yeah.
what was going to raise from the dead. None of them quite understood exactly what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus showed the other apostles his hands and his feet when he appeared to them.
Yeah.
He showed them that, and then that's when Thomas said, well, until I see it.
Mm-hmm. Darlene.
I thought too was, knowing the power that Jesus had, why would he have gone through that? That, I'm sure they just kept waiting, that it's going to end here pretty soon.
Yeah.
He's not going to actually die.
Right. Yeah. I thought about that. Yeah, Micah.
Just go to what a lot of people give explanations for Jesus' resurrection today. They'll say that, there was mass hallucination, or that, the disciples came and stole the body, or there are other explanations that people have tried to give for say, oh, I have to see him too. He says, unless I put my finger in the prints in his nails, and unless I put my hand in his side, only then am I going to believe. He was also ruling out like hallucination at that point. He needed to be just beyond his eyes. He needed to also feel Jesus' body to know that was the truth.
There seems to be, and we'll talk about it here in a minute, but there does seem to be a little bit of defiance in his answer. Yeah, Tom?
1 week before Thomas was confronted with Jesus, Jesus said, put your hand to my side, feel me. He appeared to the other disciples who didn't believe either. And he said, you can handle me. Spirit doesn't have flesh and bones as you see me have. So they doubted too.
Mm-hmm.
First.
Yeah, all right. Buddy? Oh, yes.
This might be a little bit of a silly idea, but maybe Thomas thought that someone was impersonating Jesus, and he wasn't exactly sure if it was actually true.
Yeah, I mean, there's no telling what was going on through their minds at this point in time. They have just lost their Lord and Savior, and there could have been, I mean, we've seen the leaders of the Jews claim that somebody that Christ had healed was just, oh, well, it's not the same person. This isn't the blind man, So there could be, yeah, that could be. Okay, anything else? We just have, 8 minutes left. Anything else on why it might be reasonable? Yeah, Tom.
Jesus had said, no man takes my life. I lay it down on my own. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. Yet, who were they believing? They were believing all those other rumors instead of what he said.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, why might it not be reasonable?
He had seen Jesus rise Lazarus from the dead.
Yeah. He had seen the miracles Christ was able to perform. Art?
I was just going to say, one of the things that kind of stood out to me is when the disciples saw Christ, they were gathered on the first day of the week, and Thomas wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas refused to kind of put in the work. If you want to see Jesus, Jesus says, well, then assemble and learn about him. And he wasn't there. He could have been there.
Yeah.
And so in that way, he's like, well, I'm not going to put in the time, but when you guys say you see him and you're supposed to be here, I'm not going to believe it.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Kind of goes to that defiance. Yeah, Micah?
Another reason why it might not be reasonable is Jesus told them multiple times that he was going to be killed and raised from the dead.
Yes. And they just could not understand it. They couldn't wrap their minds around it. But what about kind of the beyond what we've mentioned, the kind of the last thing I had on this was what does this say about Thomas? And I guess Art, kind of touched on it already, but what does this say about Thomas and his attitude towards the testimony of his fellow believers at this point?
Well, one of the things I said was what Mike hit on. Grief-stricken people see a lot of things at the time. These people, their hope, everything had been lost. And he could have easily said, you thought you saw him, but you didn't. But I think there's another part, too. Why did he appear to you, not me? Why did y'all get it? And I didn't.
Unless it was a conscious decision, kind of like Art was talking about. He didn't put any effort not to be there.
Yeah, I mean, possibly. We don't know.
We don't, that's right. We're allowed to speculate on all of this. Yeah, Dan?
I kind of think, we like to say things like seeing is believing, stuff like that. The gospel is full of people who saw what he did and didn't believe.
Yeah.
So I think there's a bit of a hierarchy of faith, right, as we pointed out here. It's like when the disciples were fearful of the storm, right? Jesus didn't say they had no faith, but he said it was little.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why do you have little faith? I don't think he tells Thomas that he has no faith here, but that's little.
Mm-hmm.
There's a greater faith if you could look at the words of Christ and understand and prove he's faithful. That's a greater thing than taking the seed you believe.
Yeah, buddy. Jennifer?
I think we see Thomas at first being like heart and soul committed to Jesus, the Jesus he thought Jesus was. And then that gets absolutely shattered. And he is disillusioned, and it sounds like maybe he's jaded and bitter. And I think what he's saying is, I'm not going to allow myself to be hurt on that level again, just based on what you're telling me. If I'm going to put my heart and soul back into this, it's going to be based on something that I know for myself.
Yeah. Very good point. I had this next slide up here. I think in my mind when I was preparing this, I distinguished these a bit more than was probably worthwhile. But same discussion. We do know that for whatever reason Thomas did doubt. So in your mind, what do you continuing our discussion, why do you think he might have, we know he did, whether it was reasonable or not, which I think we can probably all agree that it wasn't reasonable based on what Jesus said to him following. But why do you think Thomas doubted? I would say despair is probably the best case scenario, whereas the worst case scenario would probably be that it was just outright defiance, belligerence on his part. You see what he said, going back to that passage, I will not believe. And that's, he is outright defying his fellow believers here. So you could, that's taking it, that's kind of a worst possible scenario here, but you could, I guess, glean that from this passage, from his statement, unless I see his hands, I will never believe. Dad, did you have something?
Well, man, keep on blessed are those who are not seen yet.
Yes, and I didn't want to.
Maybe in my review, but as Tom pointed out, the other disciples had their doubts previous to seeing Jesus.
Right. Yeah, and yeah.
I think it's beneficial for us today that there wasn't peace, and that he had to see it, and because he was doubtful, he wasn't into conspiracy theories, he saw it and believed, and it shows people that may have trouble believing.
Yeah. And I had an entire, probably close to half of my lesson that I'm not even getting to, on making application of this to our lives as Christians, and I did not manage my time well. Did I see another hand over here? I thought I saw another hand. Yeah, buddy.
I think part of the answer is in the next verse, verse 30. Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which were not written in this book. These are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. It's an example for us to see all of these things, all of these people, what they've gone through,
Yeah.
so that we can understand ourselves.
Yeah, without question. Well, we are out of time. I apologize. I had almost another 2 pages of notes that thought I would get to, making application of this to our lives. I apologize. I did not manage my time well at all this morning, but appreciate the discussion, and hopefully you still got something out of it. So thank you.